Hello, world. Okay. So the first of our readers this evening is going to be, the first of our featured readers this evening is going to be Stephanie Lenox. Stephanie is the author of The Business, Congress of Strange People, and The Heart That Lies Outside the Body, and the co-author of Short-Form Creative Writing with H.K. Hummel. An enrolled citizen of the Pokagon Band of the Potawatomi. I should have practiced this. Not anymore. She studies. That's right. An experience that informs her recent poetry. She works as an editor at Chemeketa Press in Salem, Oregon, and is completing The Elements of Inclusive Style, a book on writing with clarity, accountability, specificity, and humanity. This is Stephanie Lenox.
Thank you, Mark. You're getting better and better. It's Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, so you'll get it eventually. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I want to thank Mark in particular and Juniper for inviting me, and to Emmett for sharing the stage, and also Desiree and Lizzie for your wonderful poems. That was a joy to hear. And thank you all for being a part of this evening of poetry and showing up. So as Mark mentioned, for the past year, my poetry writing has been a little bit on the back burner because I have been writing a book of nonfiction about writing. So what else would I write about? Write about what you know. So I've been researching and writing about inclusive language and how we can use words in ways that draw people in and that are clear, precise, and respectful. And as I've been working on this book, I keep remembering these three questions that I learned Ursula Le Guin had over her desk. And in case you don't know Le Guin, I hope you do, but if you don't know who she is, she was a renowned writer from Portland. She wrote 23 novels, 12 volumes of short stories, 11 volumes of poetry, 13 children's books, 5 essay collections, and 4 works of translation. So she really knew what she was doing. But she had these 3 simple questions over her desk, and they've been guiding me both in the writing that I've been doing this year, and I've also been thinking about how these questions impact my work as a poet. Is it true? Is it necessary, or at least useful? Is it compassionate, or at least unharmful? I can think of no better rubric, no better framework for considering how we use language than these 3 questions. I'll repeat them again because I think they're so simple and so important. Is it true? Is it necessary or at least useful? Is it compassionate or at least unharmful? So in choosing the poems I read tonight, I want to be mindful that there is a lot that's happening right now in the world that feels out of our control. But what we can control is this present moment, our words and how we care for each other. Poetry is an invitation to step away from that noise of the outside world and to share that experience with others and to revel in how powerful words can be. So with that, I'm going to read some poems, some older poems and some newer poems, but the common theme among them are survival. Survival as a person, survival as a mother, survival as a citizen of a nation where I'm just beginning to learn our language. So with that, I'm going to start with some poems from my first book, and I realize I didn't start my timer, so hold on. Okay, there we go. Talking about the present moment, dogs are like king of being in the present moment, right? So I wanted to read a poem about a dog and what this dog taught me. So this is called Torturing the Dog. To our ratty mutt bear, any other 100 sounds could be his name. He'd tilt his tangled ears to Buddy, Bimbo, Buddha, wag his tail at buffoon or bum. And the cat, preferring to remain nameless, watched him roll and sit and beg to beefcake or butthead. All that mattered was saying it high and rich, dangling the word like a biscuit above his nose. My sister and I, bored, would position ourselves on opposite sides of the yard with Bear between us, calling and calling his name to see where his loyalties lay. We'd croon any name we could think of, piercing the air with shrill devotion, reveling in our power as our dog ran great spasmodic circles between us. Tongue hanging out, round and round, shredding the grass, kicking up dirt, drool trailing like reins no one would ever want to control, running and running until he puked. A poet at heart, he rhymed sweet with treat, walk with talk, sopping up vocabulary with the small sponge of his brain. He was my first teacher, dog crazy with love, loving everyone equally, running circles around our created confusion, delirious with our attention, whatever our intent, taking every lovely last syllable as his own. So these are poems from my first book of poetry, Congress of Strange People, and some of the poems are written in the voices of other people. And I've been thinking about survival and how do people who are vulnerable survive at times like this. And so I wanted to read a poem that is about a man who managed to survive in spite of the odds. Many of my poems in this book come from the Guinness Book of World Records, and so I start with a little bit of an excerpt from the book to orient you to the voice that's speaking. So this one's in the voice of Christopher Wall, who was born on August 19th, 1975, and he is the longest known survivor of the condition known as ectopia cordis. The mortality rate is high, with most patients not living beyond 48 hours. This is the heart that lies outside the body. I know people want to touch it, like I'm some pregnant woman or one of those cut open cows with a portal in its side. As soon as I could talk, I said aorta, pulmonary artery, vena cava. These words hold my life in place. I learned how to have fun with it, dress it up like a ventriloquist dummy, throw my voice into the fleshy lump. I memorized the telltale heart and chased my cousins around the yard shouting, it grew quicker and louder and louder every instant. I've had to explain myself so often, ectopia cordis, ectopia cordis, ectopia cordis, ectopia cordis, that once I totally lost it and hit a man for asking. And, of course, considering my condition, he forgave me. Now people don't bother to ask, or if they do, I say it feels just fine. In fact, I've lived so long, the doctors say I'll die like everyone else. I have dreams that it fills with air, floats away. I don't know what that means. So even though this this book is written in the voices of other people, I'm going to be vulnerable myself and read a poem that is in as close to my voice as I can possibly get. This is called my last poem, and it's not actually the last poem in the book, but it's close to it. And it's got me thinking about how do we resist powerlessness? And sometimes we just have to embrace silliness. We have to embrace each other. We have to assert ourselves in one way or another. So this is called my last poem. I write my name instead of the poem. It swims cursive through the English Channel. At the right margin, it crawls out breathless and dripping with victory. It's all about me. The president places a gold medal around my neck with my name in diamonds. The crowds chant. They fill the stands and look just like me. My face grins from the cover of Time. The article praises my beauty, my skill. I wrote it. When I walk down the street, every dog whimpers after me. I am the hero of children. Shopkeepers paint my name in neon across their windows. Wednesday's dinner menu honors me with extra gravy. I am a guest in every capital. Every poem I read begins and ends with my name. I endorse shoes. The meter is remeasured to fit my foot. All new technologies must pass my approval. Parents give newborns my name like a raffle ticket. The world spins in my direction. The economy blossoms because of me. The literacy rate rockets because of me. Wars end because of me. Peace prevails because of me. If there's hope, it's me. If there's prosperity, me. Change, me. Love, me. So I'm going to read a little bit, just one poem from The Business, which is a book of poems I wrote when I was very angry and I was a secretary and I had nothing to do all day but think about how to get back at my boss. And so I wanted to be mindful of the vibe I'm putting out. So I'm not going to read all the angry poems, but I'm going to read one that I feel like celebrates a moment of kindness in the midst of absurdity, which is what work is, right? Like, how do we survive work? We find those little joys that keep us going. And so this is, attention to whoever left fish uncovered in the office fridge for 3 weeks, think of others. So, all advice we should take, think of others. There are many ways to start a war. Take, for example, his assistant's short skirts. Or the sign on the bathroom door that reads, "If you sprinkle, when you tinkle, be a sweetie, wipe the seedy." No wonder no one likes poets. Meanwhile, paperclips disappear into a parallel universe. Your stapler each morning is turned ever so slightly to the left. It's psychological warfare. Soon enough, all whispers sound like your name. You're blamed for the broken coffee pot, and as a result, it will be months before the others look you in the eye. How hard is it to replace the toilet paper roll? Isn't that what we mean by community? Above the cubicles, little flags of dominion, little flags of surrender, but no one will tell you which is which. The intern says something about economies of scale. Because of this, we avoid him in the lunchroom. He won't last long. Here, the accountant's perfume creates a hostile work environment. Someone is going to HR about the dead plant in the corner. Some rules should never need to be explained. In the afternoon, the microwave chimes and someone distributes handfuls of popcorn, a bag of fluffy and butter-soaked aneurysms we all can share. Okay, so I was going to turn from there to some poems about motherhood. And, you know, it's sort of creepy. I write when I revise a poem, I write the date of when I revised it. And this one says I revised it in 2028. So I don't know how that happens. But this is sort of a time-traveling poem. It's called In Light of Recent Events. And so I wrote it a long time ago, but it feels very present. And so I think it could be any recent event that you have in your mind when I read this. So I'll start. In light of recent events. None of this do I take lightly. The clink of cereal bowls, the sun as it illuminates hand-smudged windows, the newspaper I must, more often than not, turn face down on the breakfast table. Across from me, my children beg for comics and weather. When I reach for it, my husband's eyes tell me, not now. My insatiable readers sound out the world, letter by letter, and they will not be deterred. In sight of words they suspect are silences that no one can explain. The 8-year-old asks, how can it be that I am just me? The 6-year-old debates the existence of vampires and chomps on Lucky Charms. They can count by 5s to 1,000 and will prove it right now as my coffee cools. They want to know if it ever ends. No, I say it never ends. Late as we are, there is no time for headlines or excuses, so we scrub and brush and launch toward another day. Already I am insisting on kisses before they bound hand in hand toward the school door, their glittering backpacks blinding me as they go. This is called The Mark. I don't know how many of you have marks on a door frame, in your home, or your parents did that for you. The Mark. Each year, I level your height against a door frame, the flood of your body rising. I hold my breath submerged. You ask if I'd rather control fire or water or wind or earth, if I'd rather fly, and if so, on what kind of wings? Water, I say. I want to control water. Some days my love is all buoyancy. Some days my love drags me under. You who began in the puddle of me will pour out the front door into the world's quenchless thirst. Try again, you say, kissing my forehead. This time I choose wind and walk around all day with invisible wings. This one is called Hunger, and I ransacked Wikipedia all about rats in order to write this poem, but it's also about survival. So, just born, the dam licks the rat pups to life, drawn by love and salt and instinct, to inscribe in glistening detail on their blind bodies the innumerable urgent conditions of survival. For a new mischief of rats in the gnawed-on nest, the world is mother tongue framed by incisors. Soon the pups will chew through wood, plaster, cinder blocks, anything to wear those teeth down. We are the ones who give the rat its human meaning, reviled plague vector, lab experiment, or holy descendant of a Hindu goddess. And yet each rat carries its codex of nurture into nature's wordless fray. Whether peril or plenty, the mother's care prepares the pups for whatever hunger comes their way. And let's see. So I'm going to read a few poems from a manuscript that I had in the works that is no longer relevant, we hope. let's see, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna read, okay. So during the pandemic, I had a hard time writing, and I had to give myself tiny assignments just to keep myself moving. And so I decided I was going to write a new form that I called Quarantinas. And what it is, it's a small square made of 40 words exactly. So Quarantina comes from the Italian, meaning 40, and it's also associated with the 40 days that sailors were required to quarantine on aboard ships during the plague. And so I thought it was a good way to get me writing again and thinking about poetry. So I'm going to try to read some poems that focus on survival, so none of the darker ones in this collection, but some of the ones that really think about how do we persevere in spite of everything. So I gave myself a freebie, so even though the poems had to be 40 words, the titles, I didn't count the titles, so I could do whatever I wanted with the title. So this is Great-Grandfather Always Wanted to Play the Trumpet. My grandmother, age 12, drove her family's Model A from Hartford to Oshtemo, Michigan, to wave at her father through sanatorium windows, tuberculosis threading his lungs to lace years before the vaccine. Somehow, miraculously, a survivor, he played fiddle instead. And so one of the things I did when during 2020 is I started studying Potawatomi, which is the language of my tribe, the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi. And the pandemic made it possible for the tribe to offer virtual language lessons, and that was how I was able to connect. And so I started integrating some of those words into these quarantinas as I was learning them. So this one is called mokwaki, crying, and it's a word that means crying because one has been left behind. I learned how my people did not let their babies cry at night because a crying baby and a lost cub sound alike. Mother bear, Mokokwe, she cries, Mokwaki. With these words, the bear in the dark seeks her own. Another one of these tiny quarantinas is framed around a phrase in Potawatomi called Ijua Anwe, which is this great, basically when someone asks, how are you doing? It's rude to say you're doing well. You have to, you typically say Ijua Anwe, which means I'm fine in spite of everything. And it just seemed like the perfect phrase for the pandemic, for now, forever. So I will read this one. Ijua Anwe, just fine in spite of everything. Even when I'm not okay, I'm okay. As in all correct. Satirical spelling that confounds spell check. The word's exact origin is unknown. Too many false etymologies have tangled in that family tree. Like me, I'm okay. I'm Ijua Anwe. And I'll read this one. It's maybe a little bit pointed, but it hasn't been great. Maritime Code revived the Lima flag. So Maritime Code revived the Lima flag in 2020, yellow and black, last used in 1916 to signal onboard disease. Each morning, my neighbor hoists his flag in an observation of greatness, sailing his ranch house into the sun's open wound. Okay. And let's see, let me wrap up with one. Okay, something a little lighter. Grab a hub with Hermes. From an idling sedan, the gilded youth launches, bearing to-go boxes hammocked in plastic. He glides on wheels to the doorstep, god of contactless commerce, patron of the grounded travelers, herald who wings and sings to the living and the dead. And I'll end with a few poems that are more about my exploration of the Potawatomi language, and then I'll turn it over to Emmett. So this is one of the first poems that I wrote, Ojindis, Blue Jay. That's the one hollering, Ojindis, pure blue racket of feathers, a gift from the sky, Beneshi, bird that interrupts with its whole body, a ruckus call carried from the forest edge and through the long distance, screaming Jay, Jay, named by others for your noise. I cannot help but listen and holler, here I am, great grandchild of a broken silence, repeating these words for the first time. And the one I'll end with happens to be on a broadside that Juniper, beautiful broadside that Juniper made. This is Yankobida. And maybe I should explain Yankobida, or maybe the poem explains it. It means a cord, but it also means both ancestor and great-grandchild. So I think it's an interesting word. So Yankobida. I keep circling around what I want to say. Something about how Yankobida means ancestor and descendant, great-grandparent and great-grandchild, in a language I am just beginning to speak. The word has two sides, like a coin toss to see who goes first. Not by chance, I stand with you here, on either end of a cord that stretches across generations. So long I cannot see your face, but I feel your weight as I pull one thick word after another from the place I know but cannot name. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Wasn't that super? That was super. Okay, two things. First is, I was supposed to have index cards on the tables. At the end, we'll have a little question and answer. So I'm going to be distributing these. Oh, sure, you can do it. And then the second is, we're gonna, let's just stand up, take a little stretch, come back in 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll have Emmett. Oh, I'm gonna stay up here. I won't move. Okay, here we go. All right. So, this is super. I'm even getting my glasses on. That's how serious it is. All right. It seemed longer to me, Bob. I have a terrible sense of time. So, okay, super. Okay, we're still broadcasting, super. My phone hasn't exploded and erupted into flame yet. Everything's great. Our second featured reader tonight is Emmett Wheatfall. Emmett lives in Portland, Oregon. He is a two-time nominee for Oregon Poet Laureate and recipient of the prestigious 2024 Oregon Poetry Association Patricia Ruth Banta Award. His poetry has been published in several books, collections, and anthologies. Emmett has been the keynote speaker at 2 Oregon Poetry Association conferences. In 2020, Corban University produced a 9-part documentary highlighting Emmett's life and introduction to poetry. Emmett is one of Oregon's premier poets, known nationally and internationally. So here is Emmett Wheatfall.
A poem entitled, When the Time Comes for You to Speak. When the time comes for you to speak. When liberty is not yours, you must know it. When the time comes for you to speak, you must. When it establishes itself, you must recognize it. When in life there comes alignment of providence, do not settle into it. When it's about authoritarianism, totalitarianism, fascism, and such isms, remember to never reverence or revel in the moments. In those moments, no politician, not even a reverend, is needed. Just a poet. Just a poet. Let me begin by saying what a delight it is to be here with you. What a privilege and an opportunity. Juniper, Mark, those on the Salem Poetry Festival committee that put this together, thank you for inviting me down. I see so many friends. Some of you I met at the Oregon Poetry Association conference, which was really an outstanding conference. Some of you know by way of Facebook, but it's all good. And I thank you so much for coming out. Stephanie, what a wonderful set you did there. Feature. Would you give her a big hand, please? I have a plan tonight for my feature, and what I want to do tonight is I want to do protest. Protest. Now that's, you can clap. I'm good with that. Protest. But I want to do a little disclaimer first. First and foremost, I want to let you know I'm not politically affiliated. All right? I'm not progressive. I'm not conservative. I'm not Democrat, Republican. I'm not independent. I'm just Emmett. I call balls and strikes. So when I talk about protest poetry, I'm not necessarily leaning toward one particular side of the spectrum. What I'm doing is simply speaking my truth. If you got my book tonight, which I'll talk about before I go, I put a little moniker in there that says, we must speak truth. We must speak truth. There's a very famous poet named Mari L. Esperance, and she has a wonderful saying. She says, to enter the story feels like drowning, and drowning is the only way to get there. And so what I want to say to you is that protest poetry is as old as poetry is itself. Anybody who knows anything about the history of poetry, whether it's Europe, whether it's Asia, poetry has always been done in protest throughout the dispensations of time. People like James Baldwin, Pablo Neruda, there were the Russian poets. There comes a time when we must speak up. And I want to let you know this evening that I think it's time that poets, we write beautiful, flowery stuff of image and things like that and metaphor, but sometimes we must speak to the human condition. Sometimes we must speak to the condition for which we live in. And I want to say to you that dissent is as old as America's founding. As a matter of fact, how many of you have heard the word tariffs lately? How many of you when King George wanted to put tariff on tea, taxes on tea? What did the colonists do? They threw it in the harbor. Dissent is as old as American apple pie. I dissent. Among the consent of the governed, I dissent, Mark. Authoritarianism gaggles as windpipes rejoice, and flute players Pied Piper new polity, playing and off keys of beguiling patriotism. Authoritarianism unsheathes from scabbard, where revenge is that double-edged and serrated dagger, the avenger's ilk. Among the consent of the governed, I dissent. I dissent with the passion of prophets, a sage poet from foregone generations, slain by double-edged and serrated sword. I dissent, knowing freedom to do so is not for certain. The liberty of citizens assembled in this our republic, purchased by blood. Ephraim among the consent of the governed, I dissent. You see me using this little folding pad? I'm developing my own technique. This is the second time I'm using this folding pad, but I like it because, Eleanor, I use the folding pad this way because I usually like to be out among the people. How many of you know that generally in times past when poets spoke, they spoke in the town square? They spoke maybe from an elevated position like this, but they moved around the people. How many remember the bards and troubadours? They would move through province and valleys, and they would play stringed instrument oftentimes, and they would recite verse. What I found having this little pad this way affords me that opportunity, but tonight I'm slave to the microphone. But that's okay because we're on Zoom. One of the things that bothered me in our great republic, I'll talk about our republic a little bit later, is this fear. This fear of standing up for the things that are so important to us, the things that our founding fathers shed blood for. Fearful people. Who wants to be ruled? The imprisoned? Dare I say no one? Might you say so too? There is no guardian of the universe, no authoritative figure ruling the galaxy, except for enigmatic men ruling fearful people with iron fists, the claws of wild bobcats, notwithstanding the bite of the dreadful and fearless black bear. These people, they yearn for the freedom of the brawless woman. I'm waiting. Let me read that to you again. These people, they yearn for the freedom of the brawless woman. Come on, ladies, help me out here. You know the liberty is when you remove that contraption. Let me get back to my business. These people, they yearn for the freedom of the brawless woman. Unbridled speech of a child, unwedged underwear, power to say no without equivocation, enjoy the expressions of self-autonomy, wade in the purifying waters of faith-based pursuit. Who wants to be ruled? Does the imprisoned? Dare I say no one? Might you say so too? Fearful people. How many know that sometimes we as citizens are made a mockery? Sometimes it's the marginalized, it's the poor, it's the disenfranchised, it's the LGBTQ person, it's the trans person, it's the person with the disability, it's the person of color, it's the person that's not in the right class. Between what's good and evil. Stephanie, between what's good and evil. When time comes to mock the mockingbird, mock the bird. Weigh your mocking in the mockery between what's good and evil. Angels seated on high, they're watching. Demons below make mockery of mocking. Some people say the United States is an empire. It says that we're spread out all over the world. Our influence is pretty much on every continent in the world. We've been equated with and known to be called an empire. Is there an empire never having crumbled, where its riches now lay in ruin, its vastness once contemporary with still existent oceans and seas, where stars still enumerate in the night sky? Empire in antiquity overshadows lesser worlds. When strong men rule with an iron fist, where his woman whispers softly in his ear, royal court, his fallible conscience. Old dust settled, brick and mortar decimated, foundations trace toil made once in time. What was high is now brought low. All that's left of empire is name and markings etched in stone. What is to be known of empire is in the linguist's ability to decipher language. What's known? Empires existed, never to again command the attention of old worlds, just spoken of by the new ones. Empires. I think many of you would agree with me. What we've heard of late is this whole idea of America returning to civil war. Nonsense. I want people to know we're not going to be returning back to blue coats and gray coats. People are not going to be assembling at Appomattox or along the Mississippi. We're just not built, we're not structured that way to have that kind of war. Could there be violence in the future? Because our nation is divided in such a way we haven't seen in a long time. But it bothers me when people talk about civil war. You know who the people are who talk about civil war? They're the people that romance war. They romance it in poetry. They romance it in literature. They romance it in movies. They romance it in music. War is not something to be romanced. When I've been involved with spoken word and been at slams, I've seen young people who stand up and they recite these incredible spoken word poems with tears rolling down their face, and they're talking about revolution. And I want to tell them, have you ever shot a gun? Have you ever stabbed somebody with a bayonet? Have you ever fell on a grenade to save your fellow soldiers? I have never been to war, but I know something about war. My father served in the Vietnam War. He went into the Korean War as a young man, Richard. And then he served 2 tours in Vietnam. And on his second tour in Vietnam, he was leading his platoon through a rice field. And that's where the Vietnamese grew their food. And he stepped on a landmine. Click. And he knew from years of experience he was on something. And his fellow platoon members crawled up to him, and he told me, they said, Sarge, we can't undo this. It's a pressure device. If you let up, it's going to explode. If you put too much pressure, it's going to explode. So he knew that it would explode in cone fashion. So he had to fall off. And he was grievously wounded. And he was taken to Walter Reed Hospital, where our president went. And I remember the day being in the apartment complex over the drugstore, looking out the window and seeing my father come home with his military jersey over his shoulders and a crutch and a full-length cast. We ought to know something about war today. We see how people come back traumatized with PTSD. We don't want to do war. Civil war. Only romantics romanticize civil war. Civil war is never civil. Misfits merrily march off to it. Dead men's bones never rise. Wives become widows. Confetti each survivor's streamers. Bombs are what's remembered. Shots in the mouth, some can't talk. PTSD, the new medical acronym. Chaplains no longer preach salvation. Sing, Marvin Gaye, sing. There's too many of you dying. Civil war is never civil. Only romantics romanticize Civil War. I guess I can't leave that yet. I feel the prompting. I remember when my father was serving, if you ever saw that movie with Mel Gibson, When We Were Soldiers, I think, and the taxi cab driver pulls up at the door and he brings her the cards of soldiers who have been wounded and killed. That's my experience. I remember having to go with my mom, and I had to take care of my two little sisters while she went and delivered cards about this size to let wives of soldiers know that their husband had either been killed in action or wounded. I pray that there's no civil war. How many of you know we're a culturally pluralistic nation? We're multi-ethnic, multi-religious. There's a plurality of who we are as a people. One culturally pluralistic nation. The evisceration of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This poet calls his nation to reconciliation, its people to repentance, political division to reconciliation, the poor to redemption, religious people to righteousness, to being light for good in the world, to repudiate evil, clamor for the common good. Ring aloud the Liberty Bell and be that one culturally pluralistic nation reverencing the inclusion. Just a few more poems, just a few more poems. Everybody doing all right tonight? Come on, give Stephanie another hand. If you ain't gonna give me one, give it to her. I dream of a new republic. Our nation is a democratic republic where we elect officials to represent us. And they're supposed to carry out the will of the people. You know that. I dream of a new republic. I dream of a new republic where my blackness illuminates, complements, and completes the ideals of inclusivity. In my dream, my blackness stands boldly exposed, as colorful and undeniable as any statue of naked women from Greek antiquity. If you look for them, you will not find statues of black women. The current reality, the existing republic crumbles. Salty sea waves have eroded its sandcastles. Beachfront ideals and aspirational principles have faded from sight, sound, and memory. And the cognitive dissonance is alarming. The republic, once a beacon of hope, has unraveled like a soldier trembling in the face of intense combat, or a mean dog having lost its will to bite. The existential nature of its collapse is history repeating itself. Long live the republic, say the French. The French live rent-free in my head. They know about revolution and are prone to revolution. They embrace blackness. The late great black poet, James Baldwin, took respite among the French. In my dream, I cry for freedom and inclusivity. I dream of a new republic where my blackness illuminates, complements, and completes the ideals of inclusivity, where supremacy is made the subject of humility. My cry is more than, can we all get along? I want to hew out of my despair a new republic, tried and true, I am not Dr. King, yet I too have a dream. I'm encroaching upon my time. If you'll bear with me, I just have maybe three more short poems for you tonight. I just want to rally poets to speak your truth. Speak up. We're living in a day where it used to be our religious leaders, the Dalai Lama, or maybe Billy Graham, or even the Pope, where people would rally to what they would say. It's not so. It used to be that we'd have maybe one enigmatic social justice leader, maybe a political leader that the people would rally to, a Kennedy, a Dr. King, or something like that. But I want to remind you that it's always been the poets. It's always been the poets. In the most difficult times in histories of nations, do you know that poets have been persecuted, imprisoned, and killed for raising? Some of you know what I'm talking about. To the Republic. I have an epigraph, a little epigraph. It's an introduction to the poem. I'm doing prose poems tonight, so you won't hear rhyme or spoken word. These are all prose poems tonight. Here's the epigraph. You're probably familiar with it. If not, you should be familiar with it. A republic, if you can keep it. Benjamin Franklin, one of our founding fathers. To the republic for which it stands, with goodbye I wave my hands, my palms I wipe tearful eyes. She's going away. When will she return? Oh, my soul. My soul cries out. Must I act up like an unrepentant child? Get into good trouble, Mr. John Lewis? I feel like a motherless child. In the face of liberty, Lady Liberty, a pie is tossed. Disrobed is she of cloak and gown. Her torchlight flickers. Liberty Island is restless. The lady of virtue scorned. The lady is in distress. With goodbye, I wave my hands. Oh, Benjamin Franklin. Oh, Ben. Oh, Benjamin Franklin. Like I said, two more poems. It's this poem right here is, well, one more poem, and I'm going to talk about the book before I go because I think it's important. It's probably one of my all-time favorite poems that I wrote. It's pretty simple. And I may read through it twice to make sure that you get it. The poem is titled The King of Fools. The King of Fools. I sat with genius and belabored the point, only to never again be acknowledged. I sat with entitlement until I lost mine. Then the entitled no longer knew me. I sat with wisdom, not knowing I possessed none. And wisdom said, now you know. I sat with fools who hung on every word, and they crowned me their king. Let me walk you through that again. My goodness. How many of you ever sat around with someone they knew everything? I sat with genius and belabored the point, only to never again be acknowledged.